And the US-Africa Summit may have come to an end, but the impact of the initiatives and investment opportunities will be subject of analysis and conversation for days to come, if not years. And our State House correspondent, Adeso Omonra again, who has been in Washington, D.C., caught up with governors of Bauchi and Kwara states who are part of President Buhari's entourage. In separate interviews, they speak about the possible investment opportunities at the just concluded summit for the states, including the possibility of attracting electric car maker Tesla.
The potential of Bauchi is not so much on the table, but agriculture, solid minerals, which we also have comparative advantage. And we have it in all. We have tantalite, we have bentonite, and I was able to circulate our own investment opportunities in Bauchi in the areas of solid minerals and agriculture. And we have spoken to so many investors because we have a robust agricultural policy that is driven by baseline studies, and where we have told our prospective investors what we have been able to do to add to their likes. So that first and foremost, we protect investors, we relish investors, and we are fourth in the ease of doing business. And so, of course, our oil and gas potentials, the exploitation of which has been started by Mr. President as one of his legacies, also came and we discussed.
Now, Kwara, Kogi, and Niger are the states that have huge lithium deposits. And you know, lithium is about battery power, battery storage. Lithium is the future. So we're speaking to investors, and a lot of them are interested in coming to Nigeria to invest in lithium mining. You have big companies like Tesla. They showed interest in coming to Nigeria, the South Korean companies. So really, that's the drive we want, and that's the drive we're pushing.
Okay, for more on this, we're now being joined by a RISE analyst and a lawyer, Associate Professor of Law, Sam Amadi. Very warm welcome to Newsnight. I mean, it's been a week of immense goodies, one to the African nation and particularly to Nigeria. We're talking of billions of dollars, you know, being promised, whether in the area of energy, of technology, of agro, allied, you know, investments. And just like my colleague in Washington, Adesu Omonra, during the course of the summit said that the amounts are staggering and humongous. Tell us, you know.
Well, first, I think this is a change in the U.S. engagement with Africa. The U.S. has always used an anchor state, so they just look at the states they want to deal with, anchor their engagement, and basically underline issues around human rights development and preaching values. This time around, I think the Chinese incursion and Russian incursion in Africa too has changed the game.
It's like a kind of reawakening.
So they are now seeing a more win-win economic engagement. So you see, for example, the notion around the 55 billion investment, you see issues around helping with regional trade, MOU with AGOA and issues around with the AGFA in terms of trade in Africa. Also, they're talking about innovation technology. They also, at the back of the COP27 in Egypt, they are also promising to deal with providing support for climate adaptation.
Particularly with the withdrawal of fossil fuel.
Exactly. I think at the heart of it is a real understanding that Africa matters now, not for regime type, democracy, or they're not talking about that. Africa matters because it's now the home of primary resources, lithium, cobalt. Congo has gone into the game big time. So they want to
But there's no stability in Congo.
So they're not, if you look at language, they're not talking about political stability. They're engaging both dictators, presidents, everybody. Meetings, sideline with Sierra Leone, sideline with Angola, with Nigeria, even Podia, who is in something years and never want to leave power. Nobody's heckling in Washington because there's also a crisis of value in Washington. Washington finds it difficult to preach value globally now. They're struggling with democracy deficit in their own state. So I think the whole thing is pitched around saying we can be a more value-adding partner than China and Russia. It's a competitive engagement and broad-based leveraging, you know, talking about even to the sense of creating an advisory council for African diaspora, appointing a special counsel, if you like, Johnny Cochran, who has experience in managing African relationship at the State Department as a special presidential advisor.
Liaison, and he's going to lead all these, breakthroughs or initiatives through.
So I think there's a sense in which we have to take Africa serious in the context of the stiff competition from China. Yes, U.S. is still the dominant power, but they are seeing an economic duopoly, you know, China, the U.S., and that game means Africa can once be central.
And where does this leave Europe? You know, it's Russia that is being seen as a pariah that is coming to, you know, the fore here, particularly around the Sahel.
Don't forget that I think last year they had Europe-African Summit.
Yeah.
Europe is also engaging places, for example, Angola, or those Mozambique. They are trying also to weigh in and create a counterpoint to China. So the US and Europe are trying to create that western flank, to outflank China. In the case of Ukraine, they're also wooing Africans to toe the line of the West in terms of not supporting Russia and China. So basically, the question people are asking, analysts are asking, can African leaders be more gung-ho and ask for more? Can they talk in terms of fair trade? Can they push the envelope? Because it looks to me as Washington needs them more. It's not like a case of preaching down on African leaders, talking about democracy values. It's now about look hard bargaining.
What you have and what you can bring to the table.
So
and that was what President Nana Addo of Ghana seemed to be saying when he said, "We're not coming here a begging."
We're not begging. We're not coming here to be preached at. We're coming here to say, guys, you give this, we give this. So I think it's a time for a very strong diplomatic engagement to take more from Washington, especially 3 issues Africans are worried about: the climate mitigation support. 2 is the debts. So even the U.S. is even asking China to overlook debts of Zambia. You see, it says that Zambia, they can cancel those debts because Zambia is critical to the mineral resource they need. So I think that we can fight for more favorable terms of business. We can ask for a much more inclusive global capitalism using this leverage, this fear of China. If African leaders are stronger, more demanding and vocal, they could get more. Because the U.S. itself is trying to retool its foreign policy engagement in the world.
But how do you put this? I mean, side by side with the strive-fund parts of Africa. You look from Central Africa, West Africa, and even creeping to Southern Africa is the issue of terrorists in Mozambique.
Instability, political conflict, misgovernance. So the point for Africa is, look, this is not yet Uhuru. So if they give us all this, but we're not building a stable economy, a real internet-driven growth economy. So it's like another form of begging. So you get these palliatives and the weakened governance. For US, it's good for them to buy off China and get more lithium cobalt that need for the next wave of technology development. But for us, Africa, we can see this feeding into conflicts. So Biden's speech never talked about democracy, handover power. Of course, we talk about elections. He had side meetings with those who are going to have election, Nigeria. But they're not strong on saying, look,
it must be democracy.
You have to go away. They are saying, we need to work with you on a broad initiative. So it's for us now, Africans, to say, look, even if we're doing this trade engagement with US and the European Union, we need to take control of our countries. We need to ground this our development in good governance.
And that is like
institutional stability. Yeah. And so we don't get kind of we don't get blindsided by this foreign
of democracy and the rest. But that will be kowtowing the Chinese own model too, blind to whether there is stability or no stability, whether the government there is democratic or no democratic. Let's just go in there and do business.
Some people in Washington, after the Iraqi calamity and the failure of nation building in Iraq and now Afghanistan, it comes to the direction that, look, let's deal with Africa just like a market, okay? But we Africans should not accept, so they're going to compete with China by playing dead bread to human rights, maybe. But it's our responsibility now to say, look, we want to grow like Europe by having political stability, democratization. But at the same time, so we're not going to wait for Europe and the US to drive the democratization agenda in Africa. We are now going to recognize that we are back to, it seems like we are back to the era of realism, where nations are competing. Look at the issue around fossil fuel, okay? UK is back to coal because of the exigency crisis of dealing with the aftermath of Ukraine war.
Yeah, war, yeah, absolutely.
So it tells a story around realism that, look, our anchor, our hope for democratization in Africa is African-based pressure, not diplomatic or foreign pressure. So
Yeah.
the US has now led the landmark that they're going to follow a trade-based, economic-based policy to help them push back on China and Russia.
But let's look at the issue of the youth budge, you know, and I know it came up too during the summit, you know, youth, women, and the whole gamut of gender issues and the rest. How key, you know, are the African youths to these new partnerships, you know, with the US, with China, and with other continents?
Some of the items around digital technology for Africa that keys into this idea of the African digital footprint. You know, new young youths in Africa, penetration, if it is good, they are creating wealth and improving themselves. But again, African youth budge is a gain if it results in not just skilling, productivity increase, as well as democratization, because the young people need freedom more than the old people. Young people are more idealistic. So the hope is that this pressure, youthful idealism, will feed into a commitment and drive for democratization in Africa. But again, the danger is that if there's a failure of democracy and development, it can feed into violent conflicts, feed into wars, because these young persons may be more radicalized and, you know, give up hope and fight all kinds of instability. So we are either or. We could end up with this budge or unleashing the capacity for innovation and growth because of their youthful, educated, and idealistic, or the system fails, and then these guys, both migration, you know, brain drain, as well as
and of course terrorists using them, you know, as agents of destabilization.
Absolutely.
Associate Professor of Law and Arise Analyst, Sam Amadi, thanks very much for your insight into the just ended Africa-US Summit.